Okay, so this week we're going to do a deep dive into some pretty crucial gardening tasks for like right now the second week of April, and we're using the GardenAdvice.co.uk gardening calendar as our guide. And I think this is a great way to get like a head start this spring right and also avoid some of the pitfalls that a lot of people run into.
Yeah, exactly. Um, we've gone through and extracted some of the most important things to do to set yourself up for success over the coming weeks.
So yeah, let's jump in. And first I want to talk about pots and troughs because the calendar mentions removing those winter flowering plants, things like your daffodils and early pansies that are finished their show. But then it goes on to say something really important.
Yeah, as you're clearing out those pots and troughs, it's the perfect time to have a look at the compost for a nasty little pest that could be lurking in there, the vine weevil.
Oh, vine weevil, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, what should we be looking out for? Well, the grubs are quite small, kind of like little maggots,
Hmm.
and they have these distinctive brown heads. And interestingly, the source mentions that they tend to be more common in the ecotype composts than the sort of traditional Johninus compost.
Yeah.
The lone base ones, which is an interesting observation.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something about the composition or the moisture retention of the peat-free mixes that might be attracting them.
Could be, yeah.
So yeah, if you've gone down that environmentally friendly route with your compost, maybe a little extra vigilance is needed. And what do they say about dealing with these vine weevils if you do find them?
The best solution seems to be applying a nematode solution directly to the pot, which makes sense. Nematodes are microscopic worms that specifically target the vine weevil larvae, so it's quite a targeted biological control method.
That's good to know. And this is not just a problem for pots and troughs, is it?
No, it's not actually, and it's important to remember that you've been adding lots of compost or grit or sand to your open soil beds. They can be susceptible too.
Yeah.
So it's a good idea to just do a general check all around the garden.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so moving on now, let's talk about seedlings because many of you listening will probably have been starting off your tomatoes and courgettes on a sunny windowsill inside, and they might look pretty good, but there's a potential issue as we move them outdoors, right?
Yeah, there is, because the light coming through a window might seem quite bright to us, but it's not as strong as direct sunlight. And the seedlings can become a bit leggy. They sort of stretch out looking for more light and end up quite weak and spindly.
Right. So how do we toughen up these little babies for the big bad world outside?
Well, on sunny days, it's good to start introducing them to the outdoor conditions gradually.
Yeah.
So you can put them outside for a few hours in a sheltered spot to get them acclimatized to the stronger light
Yeah.
and the fresh air.
Yeah. But we can't just leave them out there overnight, can we? I mean, they can still get quite cold at night.
No, definitely not. You have to bring them back inside overnight to protect them from frost damage. And this whole process of gradually acclimatizing them is what's known as hardening off.
Hardening off, right? Like plant boot camp.
Yeah, exactly. You want them to be strong and resilient when you finally plant them out.
Okay, so for those of you who haven't started from seed, or maybe you just want to add some instant wow factor to your garden, the source has some advice about chilies and peppers.
Yes, now is a great time to be looking out for those young chili and pepper plants in garden centers and places like B&Q, the DIY stores. And what's interesting is that the growers, they actually start sowing the seeds for these just after Christmas, so they've had a good head start.
So we can sort of piggyback on their expertise and get a head start ourselves without having to do all that early work.
Exactly, and the source recommends growing them in large pots, which has a couple of advantages. Firstly, it gives them plenty of space for their roots to develop. And secondly, and this is probably more important, it means you can bring them indoors during the cooler autumn months.
And that extends the fruiting period, right? You can potentially harvesting chilies and peppers right through September and into October.
Yeah, exactly, which is fantastic.
Okay, now for something a bit more advanced, the Garden Advice team mentions that they've been busy building what they call hotbeds using English frames, which sounds very intriguing. What exactly are these hotbeds?
Well, hotbed is a traditional method of gardening where basically you layer up fresh horse manure and let it decompose under a covering of soil. And often you'll have a plastic sheet on top. And the decomposition process generates a lot of heat.
So it's literally like a warm bed for the plants.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a natural underfloor heating system. And this heat is really useful for germinating early season crops. Things like lettuce salad leaves and radishes benefit from that extra warmth early in the season.
Wow, that's really clever. It's like a a completely natural and free way to give your soil a temperature boost.
Exactly. And it's a good way to get a jump start on the growing season.
Now let's talk about something a bit more aesthetic. The source emphasizes that now is the time to be planning and planting colorful borders. And specifically, they're talking about borders that don't rely on lots of summer bedding plants that you have to keep replacing every year.
Right. This is all about creating sustainable, long-lasting color and interest, using a mix of perennials and self-seeding annuals and shrubs. And by carefully choosing plants with different flowering times and different foliage textures and shapes, you can create a border that looks good throughout the year without having to constantly replant it.
Yeah, that's much more environmentally friendly and less work too. And they even talk about using AI to help with this planning process.
Yeah, it's quite amazing, actually. They're using their latest AI agents to generate these really realistic images of how your garden will look throughout the year,
Yeah.
so you can see how your plant choices will work together through the seasons.
That's incredible. It takes all the guesswork out of it.
Mhm.
Okay, and before we wrap up, I believe the Garden Advice team has some exciting events coming up for their members.
Yeah, they're organizing trips to Kew Gardens for their members and also for members of their My Garden team.
Sounds like a great day out. So if anyone's interested in joining them on one of these trips, where can they get more information?
Well, the best thing to do is to check your emails or follow the link that they've provided. It's called Kew Gardens Visit Information.
Okay, great stuff. So let's just summarize those key takeaways from the gardenadvice.co.uk calendar. For this week, we've talked about the importance of checking for vine weevil when you're clearing out your pots. We've covered hardening off those tender seedlings. We've discussed the benefits of buying in those young chili and pepper plants and the advantages of creating a hotbed to warm up the soil. And we've also talked about that strategic approach to planting colorful borders for year-round interest.
Exactly. And don't forget about that trip to Kew Gardens.
Right. So we really hope that this deep dive has given you some valuable and immediately useful insights to help you get the most out of your garden over the coming weeks.
And maybe inspired you to try something new.
So here's a final thought to ponder as we head into the main part of the growing season. Of all the strategies that we've discussed today, which one do you think will have the biggest impact on your garden this year? Something to think about as you get those gardening gloves on. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
See ya.
Bye.